Welcome back to the Hockey News Anaheim Ducks Show. This will be our part two of our mailbag. Again, we thank you for submitting questions, whether that to be to our DMs, Instagram, Twitter, all that. Thanks again for checking us out and reading our stuff. We're gonna start here with our buddy Malarkey. Um, we got a bunch of McTavish questions, obviously. That is the hot button issue right now. So we'll start with this one, which is what's your prediction on McTavish? Does he sign? Is he traded? If he signs, what's the term slash AAV? What are you thinking here?
I don't think he's going to get traded. I feel like that'd be a very, very big mistake. I mean, obviously, you're trading for like Connor McDavid or whatever, like then you make that. But like in a realistic scenario, I think trading McTavish, whatever you get back, is probably not going to be as good as what you think or what you want McTavish to turn into. So he's definitely going to get signed for term and AAV. I think we'll just go like I think it's going to be a bridge deal, so I'd probably go like 3 years, like 6 million, maybe a little bit under that, just because like the rising cap, so you can afford to give them a little bit more on a bridge deal now. But yeah, 3 years and like somewhere maybe like 5.8 to like six.
Yeah, and I understand the kind of skepticism around this because we just witnessed what happened with Drysdale and Zegras, obviously two players that Verbeek did not draft and that, he basically went through this routine with as well. Um, but yeah, I just don't see a deal that makes sense for the Ducks to trade McTavish. If I were to bet, I'd say he gets signed. And I think, yeah, it's like we've talked about, bridge deal. I think I guessed 5.83, something like that, which equates out to about 17 and a half total. So three by 5.8, which would be more than Zegras got, but not breaking that $6 million mark.
All right. And then we got Christian on Instagram. Do you believe any of the McTavish rumors? And then Maddie on Twitter asked, any thoughts on why the Ducks org would immediately shut down the Terry availability rumors earlier this summer while letting the McTavish stuff fester?
Ooh. So let me try. Okay, so the first question, do I believe any of the rumors? I don't know what the rumors are, just that he's available, I guess. And I get if I would say Pat Verbeek's old line is Gretzky was traded. So anyone technically is available. I think that the reason McTavish is in these discussions is because, again, of how Zegras and Drysdale played out. Like, why isn't the other guys who aren't signed yet, our RFAs are like Luke Hughes, Luke Evangelista, Connor Zary. Those guys are not in the rumor mill as much as McTavish is. So I think that is the reason why. Do I believe them? No, I don't. And then any thoughts on why the Ducks? Okay, so the Terry thing, yeah, they shut that down immediately. Um, and I think it is because Terry is under contract, and McTavish is not. So like any indication that the Ducks PR would give to these rumors, like if X insider tweets something, excuse me, about McTavish, if the Ducks were to reach out to that insider and tell them, hey, McTavish isn't available for trade, that gives leverage to McTavish's camp. And the whole point of these negotiations is to get his number down to as little as they can. So that kind of destroys any leverage that Verbeek and the Ducks would have. So I think that is why uh, this isn't getting shut down. What do you think?
That's a good point. I mean, I don't even really think I thought of it from that perspective of just being like, hey, we can't let anything like get out, either good or bad, like from our side, because then that gives leverage or it gives um, things that McTavish and his camp can kind of use to be like, hey, like you said that we're valued and maybe that'll give us a bigger number. But then I think of like, they traded Zegras and so that kind of told McTavish's camp, like, well, this is like McTavish going to be the number two guy behind Leo. And Pat Verbeek had actually, I think he mentioned that too after the draft. He said that like these are going to be our number two, one and two centers is Carlson and McTavish, and then eventually when McQueen comes along, like that'll be a solid group of forwards or solid group of centers. So, but I think for the Terry stuff, I think it was just like he was never available. I feel like that was for whatever reason, like Andy Strickland had that information wherever it came from. I think um, the Ducks were kind of just like, hey, yeah, this like is not true, and like walk it back and basically like I don't know why he put that out. So, um, but yeah, I think that's you made a great point with McTavish, just how they can't give them anything to like feed off of really, and kind of try to turn the tables on them. And just because it's this negotiation has gone on for almost all of the summer, if you give them any like foothold to grab on, then maybe that kind of swings it in McTavish's direction. Then as an organization, obviously you want to try to be able to keep everybody um, under things as cheap as possible, even though that's not great for the player. But that's just like the nature of the business is you want to be able to try to keep things tight. And so I kind of understand it from that perspective.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Verbeek's Monster on Twitter asks, does Chris Kreider bounce back to a 30 goal scorer on this roster and under the new coaching staff?
I am going to say no, but I think he's going to be very close. I think he's going to be somewhere in that like 20, like 26, 27 range, especially just because he'll probably be a staple on both the power play, the penalty kill. There's plenty of goal scoring opportunities he's going to get. Like if he's playing with guys like Carlson, Gauthier, and Terry, like those are all skilled offensive players. Like Ryan Strome, he's played with Strome and Vetrano in New York, and he's played with Jacob Trouba in New York. So he has familiarity with some of the guys on the roster already, especially if he's healthy too. I think that's the big thing is if he's healthy, he's capable of being that kind of guy that can be in the high 20s, 30s, what have you. So um, I think just because like they should be able to kind of spread the offensive contributions around, especially bring in Mikael Granlund too. I don't think he'll be at 30, but I think he'll be just like a little bit under that. So maybe like he'll top out at 20, I guess. Now watch him go like 45, go crazy or something because I said that.
I mean, you'd be happy if you were wrong about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think there's two parts to that. I think yes, he bounces back to 30 goals. Not so sure just looking at the rest of his career. Like he never hit 30 until the 21-22 season and he exploded for 52. Then went back to back 30 goal seasons and then obviously dropped off last year, which I do buy the that most of that is injury driven because he dealt with back spasms, a broken hand, and vertigo, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And he still scored 22 goals. So in 68 games too, like didn't even play the full 82. So I think that's pretty impressive. And if if that's like a bad season, I think, despite he's going to be 35, I think, or no, he'll be 34 this whole season. Okay. So despite him being in his mid 30s, uh, I think, yeah, about 27, 28 goals is a realistic and reasonable estimation. And I think that would qualify as a bounce back in my opinion. And especially like you were saying with the roster, he'll be pretty well insulated, obviously with a coaching staff that we've discussed that is potentially elite. So yes, I think he bounces back. But to 30 goals, I'd say about 50-50, maybe leaning a little bit towards less than 50% that he gets there. But, that's still a pretty good number in my opinion.
All right. Jeff on Twitter said, "Do you think Tristan Luneau makes the opening night lineup? And if Luneau does crack the lineup, do you think the Ducks would be comfortable with Hellison being a regular healthy scratch?"
So was it about okay, opening night lineup? Yes, I think Tristan Luneau does make the opening night lineup. I think both Verbeek and Madden and everyone involved loves Tristan Luneau, and rightly so. 52 points in 58 AHL games in his first year in the AHL, a year after coming off of a significant knee issue, surgery, infection, is pretty impressive. I think the kid is driven and electric, when he does get the puck at the blue line or run breakouts and all that, I think, there's a good pro there, and he's done nothing to kind of temper expectations. I think um he's kind of almost I'd say like a shoe-in for opening night. Um and then if he cracks the lineup, will they be okay with Hellison as a regular healthy? I think again there will be a lot of in and out, eh, you know, judging on who's playing well. I think you can never rule out injury. I think there will be opportunity for all seven of those, including Luno, defensemen on the blue line. Um, I don't know if anyone will be a regular scratch, to be honest. I think in the modern NHL, you need to be 7, 8 defensemen deep, and luckily the Ducks have a pretty good 6, 7, 8 defensemen. Um, so yes, I think they will be comfortable with Hellison being healthy scratched in game one, even if he's not technically a regular healthy scratch. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm really fascinated to see kind of how things are going to shape out. I think the way that things were kind of handled last year, I didn't really agree with just having Zellweger and Minchikov kind of. It wasn't even really like a rotation. It was just kind of like, oh, let's
Right.
throw a dart on the board and like this guy's going to get scratched tonight. So I think if you have a rotation, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. It creates more of that sense of competition as opposed to, oh, you know what, you're going to sit out tonight. That like that's just how it is. So and like you said, having guys 7 or 8 deep, I think it's really strong, especially because a lot of these guys are young. So I mean, they're not necessarily more driven because they're young, but it's like when you're younger, most of the time it's like you have to not work harder. I don't know, like what am I trying to
Hmm.
convey here? But like it's a lot tougher for you to hold down your spot as a younger guy just because you don't have that kind of pedigree that maybe the coach is looking for as opposed to like a veteran. I'm not saying that guys like Truba and Gudas are going to be in a rotation necessarily, but it's a lot easier to kind of rotate these younger guys that don't have as much experience than do that with older guys. So looking at that young group that they have, Minchikov, Zellweger, Luno, Hellison, I think those guys will be kind of in a rotation, and it'll be interesting to see too because they'll have to kind of do a little bit of offhand pairings too. If that's the case because not everyone is going to match up very well. Just having your strong sides. So I'm really interested though to see how Luno looks. He had a great season, the AHL. The limited amount of NHL time that he's had, I think he kind of struggled a little bit, and that's why he went back down to the AHL. But I'm really looking forward to seeing how because this will be his kind of first like training camp without having to deal with anything. Like he had the surgery last year, and then I think the year before that he had a little bit of something too. Or he's coming from juniors, so this will be kind of like his full training camp without having to deal with just like anything. Like he's just coming straight out of the pro season. So I'm really excited to see how he does.
Yeah, I think the idea of a set rotation is interesting, just because like you, I disagreed with a lot of how those defensemen were handled last season, where they don't know on a game-to-game basis if they're going to be in or out. And I just think that kind of limited their upside because they were so seemingly afraid to make a mistake that they just became, guys that chip off the glass and guys that make stretch passes, and they don't really push the limits of their offensive capability, which is why they are impact players and why they have been impact players to this point in their careers. And I think hopefully they learn from that, because the last thing you want to do is put a muzzle on Luno. You want to let him go, right? You want to see what he can do, because that's when he's at his best, is when he's improvising and joining rushes and stuff like that, and not just playing it safe. So I think if you have a set rotation where maybe a guy can earn a higher spot or whatever, I don't know how it would work per se, but just without that fear of making a mistake, I think you're kind of in a way nurturing their development, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, because there's different levels to it, right? You want to create that sense of like, well, don't get too comfortable, don't get complacent because there's a guy that's ready to take your spot. But if it's to the point where you feel like you can't even do anything besides just outlet pass or chip off the glass, then you're not creating like that healthy environment of competition where it's like, oh, I can do this because I have a little bit of leeway. Like now it's just, oh, well, if I mess up, I'm going to be out of the lineup. So let me just make this super, super safe play instead of maybe moving your feet a little bit more and finding a better option.
Yeah. All right, so let's move on to Andrew's question from Twitter, who said, given the trail of crumbs that have been presented about Sennecke and his development through quotes from Madden, Verbeek, and Quenneville, is it reasonable to assume there won't be a trade as of now because they have plans to get a long look at him and how he fits?
Yeah, I don't think I wouldn't well, I wouldn't expect there to be like any major move, especially just because we're getting closer to training camp. Um, and I think the idea in the heads of general managers is you kind of have an idea of what your team is looking like going into the season. And so now you're kind of just trying to get everybody on the same page. So I wouldn't expect any major moves. Like there's not going to be like a major like blockbuster trade or I mean there's not going to be any major signing because all the big free agents have been pretty much signed to this point. So um, I think when we'd spoken to Madden in what was it in June about Sennecke and he said that kind of the only thing he still needs to work on is his physicality, getting stronger. And I think that's the thing for a lot of guys coming out of juniors and going into pros. You just need to get stronger because more often than not, there's going to be a guy in the NHL that's a lot bigger or stronger than you. So Senneca's already a big kid. He definitely needs to put on a little bit more weight. I think that was part of the issue with Troy Terry too. Is kind of when I've spoke to him in the past, he said when he first came in the league, it was really hard for him to get adjusted to just how strong guys were and how not strong he was at that point. So he's definitely gotten a lot better at that. And so um, I could see that being maybe an issue for Sennecke at first, just because that's not the way that things are played and not the way that things go in the OHL too. It's not supremely physical either. So it'll be nice to see him get a full training camp too, just because he was coming back from that foot injury last year. He'll be able to get more than one game under his belt, hopefully in the preseason. Lots of time at training camp. I think he'll probably be at the rookie camp too, so he'll get a lot of ice time uh, leading up to the regular season. So I think it's kind of his to take. If he doesn't make it, then that's okay. I don't know where he's gonna. He's probably just gonna go back to juniors, but um, yeah, I mean, I think they're going to set him up in the best possible scenario to make the team. And especially because if he does make it, then I think that shows that he played well enough to earn it because there's not necessarily a spot on the roster right now where it's like, oh yeah, they can just fit Sennecke. Like they have plenty of guys that they can kind of pop into those roles.
Yeah, and judging by everything we know about him, like he does play his best when something is on the line. If there's a roster spot on the line, we saw it with the Team Canada thing last year, where he just exploded after he got denied from camp and kind of earned his way to that selection camp. But I think, yeah, a trade at this point in the offseason is pretty off the table, especially because all the teams are, the dust has settled and we kind of know what the landscape of the NHL is as far as other depth charts and looking around the league and whatnot. So I would say trade is off the table. And but like I said before, the top nine on the Ducks roster is pretty set, barring injury. So it will be interesting to see how they handle Sennecke because are they I can guess that he's going to get his 9 games and then they'll kind of evaluate from there. But is that 9 games going to be on the fourth line? Is someone else going to be on the fourth line? If so, who? I think that'll be an interesting kind of dynamic. And, you know, um, they are going to give him as much runway as possible. He's going to have ample opportunity to prove that he is NHL ready, like you said, with rookie camp, training camp, and preseason. So, um, yeah, they're going to get a good look at him, and he's going to have the chance to prove it. And I just don't know what else he can learn at the CHL level. Unfortunately, the way his situation is, he signed his ELC last year before the NCAA agreement went through, so he's unable to play in the NCAA, so that's unfortunate. So yeah, I think and plus a third overall pick and he's has we talked about his strength that he's added. He has added about like 12, 13 pounds since last year's draft, which is pretty impressive considering the amount of hockey he's played since then and that he was injured quite a bit during that time too. So, um I think his frame is catching up to his skill level, which is encouraging and I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do in September here.
All right, we got Ethan from Instagram. What's your opening night roster, assuming all the remaining RFAs, so McTavish, Colangelo, and Washi are re-signed, and there's no other moves? So, opening night roster.
Oh boy. Okay. Um, so all right, let's just go through this. First line, I would have Gauthier, Carlson, Killorn. Second line, I would have Kreider, McTavish, Terry. Third line, okay. If is Are we talking about my personal opinion? Like
Yeah,
what
sure.
I
Yeah. Well,
okay.
yeah, because it's your roster. If you're
Okay.
Pat Verbeek,
All right, then I would do um I would do Granlund, Strome, Sennecke, and then I would have Vetrano, Paling, Colangelo as my forward group.
ooh, okay, okay.
Yeah, I know, but we just talked about Seneca, and I think I want to give him as much opportunity as possible. Um, and then maybe flip Seneca and Vetrano, but and then on D, it's pretty straightforward, I think. Lacombe, Gudis, Minchikov, Truba. Ooh, actually, maybe not. I would do Lacombe, Luneau, uh, Minchikov, Truba, Zellweger, Gudis, with Hellison as the healthy.
Well, what about the goalies?
Dostal Mrazek and Husso is in the AHL in my little roster here.
All right, Patrick Present Verbeek.
That was harder than I thought. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think my top six, I think would be the same as yours. Um, for the bottom six, um, yeah, I think it's for some reason I kind of had it just pegged as Vetrano, Granlund, Strome, and just I don't know, like it's weird how like you want to set things up where you can kind of have maybe like a matchup line. I don't think
Hmm.
you want to like rely on Carlson or McTavish to do that yet necessarily, and Granlund I think kind of makes sense for that aspect. For the fourth line, I actually had it as Nestorenko, Paling, Colangelo, but that was just because I think that Sennecke will kind of be in and out of there for the first like nine or so, and then maybe he goes back. And then you have someone like Harkins or Johnson as the extra. And then for defense, yeah, like what once you went to Lacombe Gudis, I was like, okay, yeah, like that makes sense. Like everything's just kind of gonna go down. But yeah, once you get to that third pair, I think that's kind of where things get interesting because you can kind of pop Luneau in there, and you have Gudis, Truba, Luneau. But the left side is interesting because like the pairings are kind of different, especially at the tail end of the season when they're kind of shuffling things around. So um, I think yeah, it would make sense to have Zellweger with Truba again. But then yeah, I struggle with where I would want Minchikov and Lacombe, like who would they be playing with? Because I think in there was times where Minchikov and Gudis played together last season. It was either last season or the year before, and it wasn't great.
Hmm.
Like just analytically, it was not great. And then just even on the ice, like you can like there was a big difference in watching like Lacombe play with Gudis as opposed to other guys playing with Gudis. It just felt like the way that they kind of like worked off each other, it worked so well. So maybe you kind of keep that going. And then a lot of that is dependent on just Gudis kind of getting back to where he was when he helped Lacombe kind of break out, as opposed to last season where maybe he struggled a little bit, whether it was with injury or whatnot. So I think I would go Lacombe, Gudis, Zellweger, Truba, and then Minchikov, Luneau. And you kind of you just kind of deal with like the consequences of letting them run free, so to speak, on that bottom pair. And then obviously you can move. in Hellison, maybe move him in for Luno, or you move him in for one of the other young lefties. So I think that's a pretty solid rotation. That's why I'm really excited to see kind of how Quenneville worked with those pairings, because it's a little bit different from last season where you had Brian Dumoulin and it was kind of just you move him with whatever young kid you want him to
Yeah.
play with. And then, yeah, the goalies, Dostal, Mrazek, and then Husso will be the first guy up in the event of an injury.
I'm very interested to see the Luno kind of aspect because that kind of throws a wrench into everything because you want him to, be kind of insulated, but if he's playing with like it would be weird to have him with Zellweger, right?
Yeah,
But I guess
yeah.
you could kind of at home kind of give them the easier matchups and you can give them offensive zone starts if need be, which kind of brings me back to the forwards. I think it'd be interesting to have like maybe on the road when you don't have control of matching up to kind of just roll 3, 4 lines of offensive lines and see what happens because like you're not going to be able to match up anyway. You can get your defensive players out for D zone starts, but that's about it. Um, so I'd be interested to see how they kind of play around with it. Like maybe Strome plays some centers, some right wing. Maybe he's up with Carlson and Gauthier. I think that'd be interesting. I'm very curious, and what I would kind of do that personally on the road, just kind of let him go and just try to roll 4 scoring lines and see what happens. And at home, kind of maybe shuffle the lines to get more matchup based things, like have Granlund play with Killorn and Terry maybe, and then that can be like your shutdown line if you want to call it that. But
Mhm. That's what's,
definitely, yeah.
yeah, no, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just a lot of options for Quenneville and Woodcroft to work through because there aren't a lot of players, those kind of shutdown candidates on this roster, interestingly enough.
Yeah, I think that's what's nice about adding Granlund is he's so versatile. Like he can play center, he can play the wing, he can go up and down the lineup, and he's had experience on the penalty kill, on the power play. Like he's such a versatile player, and to add a guy like that is exactly what you need because I think there was well, I mean, they had Zebra, so he could kind of move around a little bit, but I think um, Granlund for this roster is kind of a more versatile player in like the roles that he can fit, as opposed to like what Zegras could have provided in that aspect. So just because you can shift him around, and I don't think his play is necessarily going to level off if you put him in the middle as opposed to putting him on the wing.
Yeah.
And the last question we have is Isaac on Instagram. What is the realistic ceiling of the 2025-2026 Ducks?
So, from a points perspective, man, it is tough to make back-to-back significant jumps in standings and point totals. But that said, uh, the coaching staff does matter, and I think they have one of the better ones. Um, I would put the ceiling at about 97 points. I know that's a lot, but we're talking about ceiling here. And if they get off to a hot start, other teams don't. Maybe some players become available on a trade market, then that cap space kind of and all the assets and picks that you've accumulated kind of go to use, and you can adjust from there based off of how the landscape of the NHL is kind of progressing throughout the season early on because last year we saw like the Trouba deal, Fowler deals happen pretty early on. Like that's bound to happen at some point again to another team, where they're looking to sell pretty early and get a good haul. So I think if everything breaks, 97 points is a good ceiling, I think.
Yeah, I think in my mind, if they are somewhere like Montreal was this past season, I think that's kind of a good barometer for them is kind of an up and coming team, and you're taking the right steps and developing, and you get into the playoffs. But yeah, like you said, it's really hard to make like those multiple jumps because we've seen like Utah did that, um, like when they were still Arizona, and they're still in the process of getting into the playoffs. Like they have not made the playoffs yet. So, um, and just because everybody in the league for the most part is trying to get better, so it's going to be really tough to be in a playoff spot, even when you get to like that 90-point range. So yeah, I'd say the realistic ceiling is maybe like Montreal, either Montreal or like Columbus, where like you're right there and it's clear that guys are taking the right steps, but maybe you just barely miss out on the playoffs just because like the other teams around you are still so good.
Yeah, I think a lot. Yeah, I think okay, 97 might be a lot, but I think that's if literally every single thing breaks right. Montreal and Columbus were around the 89 to 91-ish point range. I think that's a more realistic, more expectation versus ceiling. I think I'm going to stick with my ceiling being that high, but I think a better kind of if I were to project more, it would be around the 85 to 90 point range, closer to 90, I guess. So I think that's not a bad call around 90 points, but that doesn't get you in the playoffs on in most years. Like it would take such a top heavy conference, much like the East was last year, to for that to kind of work out in your favor to where you can make the playoffs as a 91 point team. But again, their goal is playoffs, so and to make the playoffs in most year it has to be around 95. So you know, I'd say 91 90 is a good projection, but I'd say the ceiling is higher.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right. Anything else you want to discuss? We went through all your questions. Again, we thank you so much for submitting. I know it's kind of a dead time in the kind of news cycle because all the every team and everyone is on vacation and in their cottages. Uh, but we thank you for watching and submitting questions. I know everyone is thirsty for Ducks hockey and everyone's excited for the season. So, and we are too.
Yep. Yeah, I don't really have anything else to add, but yeah, looking forward to rookie camp in a little bit over a month and then training camp, and that's when things kind of start getting down to the nitty gritty. So yeah, looking forward to everything this season.
Oh, you know what? While I have you, we just are getting word, reports are coming out about McQueen maybe being on the verge of committing to Providence in the NCAA. What are your initial thoughts about that?
I mean, I'm kind of surprised. I thought he was just straight away going back to Brandon, especially after missing most of the season last year with his back injury. Um, I think it makes sense for him to go to the NCAA though, because like that's just the pathway that a lot of guys are taking right now. So the quality is going to be a little bit watered down now in the CHL. I think the idea for a lot of guys is they want to play against players that are older and stronger, and it's a little bit more of a physical game for the NCAA. The schedule's a little bit kind of more spread out, I guess you could say. I don't really know a lot about Providence's system from what I've read about from other people. They said it's kind of more of a north-south game. So maybe this is kind of about helping him turn into like more of just a two-way guy because it's very clear that that offensive skill, that ability is there. So maybe now it's just about turning him into this just absolute powerhouse where he can kind of do things on both ends. Yeah, especially because now Hockey East is on Victory Plus, I believe. So now people will be able to watch that, be able to watch guys that are playing the system, potentially going to be playing for the Ducks in a few years for free. So that's exciting. Um, yeah, I really thought he was just going to go back to Brandon. So for this to kind of happen, I'm pretty surprising.
Yeah, I agree. I think they must, him and his camp and the Ducks must really be convinced that like there's nothing for him to improve upon in the CHL. Like because if you're too good for that league, you will develop bad habits just because you are so much bigger, stronger, better than your competition. It is surprising just because like you haven't played and it seems like a good idea on paper to play 70 games of regular season hockey and well potentially and however many playoff games as well versus a 35 to 40 game schedule in the NCAA. However, if the main driver of this decision is for him to just be as healthy as possible and strong as possible. I think that schedule in the NCAA allows that process to kind of be a smoother transition because you're playing games just on the weekends. You have all week to practice and be in the gym and get as strong as possible. And like he is a skinny kid and he is working through a back injury, so maybe playing less but gaining strength is the way to go. There are pros and cons to each option. Um, I think it's interesting that Providence looks like the destination because, like you said, they play a very pro style game, which maybe that is part of the equation, and they want him to get him, to be more of a forechecker and two-way guy, like you were saying. So it's a very interesting development, and I am happy that we get to watch him in Hockey East and playing that level of competition is interesting. He will be getting hit by adults pretty much instead of 16-year-olds, which doesn't sound great for his back. But if it's truly healed, then it shouldn't be a problem. So I'm very curious to see how that kind of plays out and how his season kind of goes.
Yeah, and then I misspoke earlier. It's going to be on ESPN Plus, so not for free, but it's still a little bit more accessible viewing as opposed to like this the prototypical like college hockey experience.
Yeah, a disaster would have been him going to like the Big Ten where you can't watch. Like we don't get to watch Gavin McKenna play hockey this year, and that kind of stinks. Um, so I'm happy if he goes, it's going to be a hockey school. Um, so we get to watch him as much as possible. But yeah, but again, thanks for sending in your questions and thanks for watching, listening, and reading our stuff. Again, for Derek Lee, I am Patrick Present, and we'll see you next time.